I wasn't even supposed to be there. That's the part one keep going back to. That's the twist of the knife that won't stop hurting. I didn't follow her. I wasn't snooping. I didn't wake up that morning with suspicion in my chest or some gut feeling that something was wrong. I had no secret plan to catch her in the act. Nothing like that. Work just let out early. It was a random Thursday. Project got pushed. My boss waved us off with a tired smile and a go home early, recharge kind of speech. I remember thinking it was a gift, a little window to breathe. I thought maybe I'd surprise Jessica with takeout from that Korean barbecue place she liked. Or maybe finally hang those frames in the hallway like she kept asking. I even felt good driving home. The weather was nice. Windows down, playlist humming. Everything felt normal. Good even. Then I saw the briefcase. It was sitting right there by the entryway, exactly where she dropped it that morning in her rush to get out the door. The Berg *NDY leather one. Her favorite. She only used it for high-profile meetings. Made her feel put together, she once said. I picked it up without even thinking. Figured, why not? I'll swing by, drop it off, be helpful. Be the good husband. She told me she had a late lunch meeting with a client. Some new investor she was trying to impress. The name wasn't familiar, but I didn't question it. She worked in commercial real estate. That kind of thing happened all the time. I'd heard about long lunches, slow negotiations over wine and imported cheese plates. I didn't love it, but I never wanted to be the kind of guy who got weird about her success. I even texted her on the way, something simple. Hey, got off work early. You left your case. I'll drop it by the hostess stand. She didn't reply. Not right away. When I pulled into the lot next to the restaurant, this sleek little Italian place she'd mentioned before, I was still just thinking about being helpful. I wasn't expecting anything. But then I saw them. Jessica. And him. I recognized her first, of course. She was standing just outside the restaurant, laughing, flipping her hair in that playful way she did when she was on. And she was definitely on. Everything about her posture screamed comfort. Flirtation. Her dress was short, her heels high. She leaned into him like they'd done this dance before. And then she opened the door to his car. Not hers. His. That's when my stomach flipped. I didn't even know this guy, but watching her reach out and open his car door like that, like it was the most natural thing in the world, it made my legs feel numb. I just sat there in the driver's seat, frozen. I remember thinking, maybe it's not what it looks like. Maybe it's just a casual thing. A business meeting with a weird location. Maybe she's just being polite. Then she looked up and saw me. We locked eyes across the lot. For a second, I expected guilt. Or shock. Or even some kind of panic damage control. But that's not what I got. Jessica looked annoyed, like I just ruined her day. She didn't flinch. She didn't back away from the guy. She just muttered something to him, rolled her eyes, and started walking straight toward me. The heels clicking on the asphalt, the tension in her jaw, all of it burned into my brain. She didn't even say hi. She stopped a few feet from me, snatched the document case out of my hand, and said, "What are you doing here?" Her tone wasn't confused. It wasn't surprised. It was irritated, like I had done something wrong, like I was the one who'd betrayed her. You left this," I said, my mouth dry. "I thought I'd just drop it off." She sighed like I was a problem she had to fix. "I told you I had a meeting," she snapped. "You can't just show up unannounced like this." Unannounced? I felt like the ground was shifting under me. "You said it was a client lunch," I said. "That guy, he didn't look like..." She cut me off. "He's an investor," she said, stressing the word like I was too dumb to understand. "We're talking about projects, strategy. These things happen in casual environments. God, not everything is some big secret." I just stared at her. She was dressed to the nines. Hair curled, nails done. The kind of effort she hadn't made for me in months. And she was calling me suspicious? "Jess," I said carefully, "I'm not trying to accuse you of anything. This looked like more than a meeting." And that's when she launched into it. Her voice didn't rise. She didn't yell. That's not her style. But the way she spoke, felt like being pelted with cold water. "You're jealous," she said, shaking her head. "You've been like this for weeks. Watching me, asking questions, overthinking everything. It's exhausting." "I brought your case," I said quietly. "That's all I did." She laughed, but it wasn't a kind laugh. It was sharp, defensive. "No, you brought your suspicions," she said. "You came here to catch me in something. You don't trust me. And you know what? That says more about you than it does about me." The man in the Lexus honked. A short, polite beep. Jessica turned toward him, then looked back at me. "We'll talk later," she said flatly. Then she walked away, got into his car, and left. I stood there for a long time, long after the car had pulled out of the lot, long after the sun dipped behind the trees and the shadows stretched across the pavement. I had her keys in my pocket, the ones she always made me carry in case she locked herself out. I pulled them out and stared at them like they might explain something, but they didn't. The restaurant behind me buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. The parking lot emptied out slowly. I sat back in my car and didn't drive anywhere. I didn't know where to drive. It's like my brain was buffering. I kept thinking, why wasn't she afraid when she saw me? Why wasn't she flustered? Unless this wasn't new. Unless she had nothing to hide. Because she already made peace with hiding it. That night I didn't confront her. I didn't call. I didn't send some angry text. I went home. I poured myself a drink. I stood in the living room we decorated together, surrounded by the life we'd built, and I stared at the empty spot where her shoes usually sat. And all I could think was, how did we get here? After that day in the parking lot, something inside me changed, but I didn't show it. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I didn't do any of the things people probably imagine when they think about betrayal. Instead, I went quiet. She texted later that night. Just a simple, "Thanks for dropping the case. Sorry if I seemed tense earlier. Long day." I didn't respond. But from that point on, I started watching. Not spying. Not snooping, at least that's what I told myself. I wasn't rifling through drawers or installing trackers. I just started noticing. The first thing I saw was how often her phone was in her hand now. Jessica used to be the type to misplace it constantly. Left it in the car, in the bathroom, under the couch cushion. I once found it in the fridge next to a carton of almond milk. She used to laugh about it. Said she was chronically distracted. But now her phone was never out of reach. Not at dinner, not while we watched TV, not even when she went to take a shower. She'd prop it up on the counter like a lifeline, screen facing down, volume off. And if I so much as glanced in its direction when it buzzed, her eyes would flash like I'd stepped over some invisible boundary. Once, I made a joke. Something dumb. Like, "What's the password? State secrets?" And she didn't laugh. She just said, "That's not funny," and walked out of the room. Strike one. Then there were the stories or the lack of them. Jessica used to talk about work all the time. Not just the wins, but the nonsense. The guy who microwaved salmon, the client who thought a 3-month build-out could be done in 6 days, the intern who couldn't figure out how to forward an email. She used to vent, celebrate, even ask my opinion. Now, nothing. She stopped talking about her coworkers altogether. When I asked how her day went, she'd just say, "Busy," or "tiring," or "ugh, meetings." That was it. No names. No details. Just vague placeholders where connection used to be. Strike two. And then came the makeover. It didn't happen all at once. It was gradual, subtle. So subtle I probably wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't started paying attention. Her morning routine used to be a blur of dry shampoo and whatever blazer was closest to the door. But now she took her time. She'd spend 45 minutes on her hair, perfecting loose waves with a curling iron she'd forgotten we owned. Her perfume changed to more floral, more expensive. She bought new clothes, started coming home with boutique shopping bags and carefully wrapped packages that never made it into our shared laundry. "Treating myself," she'd say when I asked. "You know, feeling empowered." Empowered. That was a new one. She said it like it was a shield. Strike three. Some mornings she said she was going on a run, that she was trying to get back into shape, reclaim her discipline. But her running shoes looked brand new, white soles, uncreased leather. Her hair always looked too perfect afterward. And her mileage app? She never let me see it. One Saturday I got curious. She said she was going to run the loop near the high school, about 4 miles. I watched the odometer on her car before and after she left. She'd added 25 miles. When she got home, she was out of breath. That part was convincing. But she was also glowing, like someone who'd just gotten out of a long, steamy shower. Eyes bright, cheeks flushed, hair smelling faintly of a cologne I didn't recognize. Not sweat, not soap, something else. Strike 4. I didn't confront her. Not then. What would I even say? Hey, you're using too much mascara and I'm tracking your car mileage? I didn't want to sound crazy. I wanted to believe there was a logical explanation for everything. But the red flags kept multiplying. I was drowning in them. One evening, I went to grab something from her closet. My laptop charger had slipped under the dresser. That's when I saw it. A small, velvet ring box tucked into the back corner, half buried under scarves. I opened it, thinking maybe it was something she bought for me. Inside was a delicate silver ring with a blue stone. Not a man's ring. Not something I'd ever wear. Not even her size. I called out without thinking. Jess, what's this ring for? She came upstairs fast. Too fast. Grabbed it out of my hand like I was holding a ticking bomb. Oh, that? It's for my cousin, she said casually. Birthday gift. I was gonna mail it next week. You never said you had a cousin, I said, half laughing, waiting for her to crack a smile and admit it was for herself. She didn't. I don't tell you everything, she said, and shut the closet door. Strike 5. After that, I stopped asking questions. Not because I stopped caring, but because I knew the answers would just dig the knife deeper. Jessica was a master at making me feel paranoid for noticing what was obvious. The moment I mentioned something, anything, she'd flip it. I was insecure. I was controlling. I was making things up. Once, she even said, "You're sabotaging us by overthinking everything. Can't you just trust me?" Trust. It used to come naturally. Now it felt like a dare. And yet, despite all this, I didn't leave. I didn't blow up. I didn't even bring it up again. Instead, I clung to this idea that maybe this was just a phase. That maybe, just maybe, she was dealing with stress in her own weird way. That people drift and maybe we'd drift back. Marriage, I told myself, was about endurance. About weathering storms. Not every dry spell is a desert. Sometimes people pull away before they come back. But deep down, I knew this wasn't distance. This was disappearance. She was slipping through my fingers one morning at a time. Every day felt like waking up next to a stranger wearing my wife's face. She still made coffee. Still kissed me goodbye. Still called me babe when she wanted something from the upstairs closet. But her eyes weren't the same. There was a tightness around them, like she was waiting for me to mess up so she could justify something. And I started thinking maybe she already had. I stopped sleeping well. Woke up at 3 a.m. Too many nights, heart racing, dreams half remembered. I kept telling myself I was imagining things. That I'd watched one too many cheating story videos online. That my brain was sabotaging me. But then I'd smell that cologne again, faintly on the passenger seat. Or I'd see her smile at her phone. The kind of smile she hadn't given me in months. There was a mosaic forming, tiny pieces of inconsistency, of doubt, of changed routines and careful lies. And I was the one putting it together, even if I didn't want to admit what the picture was showing me. Sometimes I'd stare at our wedding photo on the bookshelf. Her in that open-back dress. Me in a rented tux that didn't quite fit right. We were happy that day. Laughing. Raw. Honest. I wondered where that version of us went. I wondered if she missed it too. Or if she'd already decided that version was dead. By then, even her dog, my dog technically, I'd had him before we met, stopped sleeping in our room. Started curling up at the foot of the guest bed. Animals know. One night, I stood in the hallway, watching the glow of her phone light up the bedroom. She was lying on her side, texting someone, smiling into the screen. I just watched. Not in a creepy way, just in a lost way. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did and just didn't care. I stood there long enough to hear her laugh quietly, then sigh and lock the phone. She turned over and pretended to sleep. Or maybe she really did. I didn't sleep at all. That night something clicked into place. I wasn't imagining this. This wasn't overthinking. This wasn't a phase. This was a slow, silent unraveling, and I'd been watching it in real time, too afraid to admit what it really was. Infidelity doesn't always show up in lipstick stains or long phone calls behind closed doors. Sometimes it looks like silence, like detachment, like a face that lights up for someone else but barely flickers for you. Jessica was already gone. She just hadn't packed yet. The day she said she was going to Austin, I didn't even blink. Jessica had been to enough conferences over the years that it didn't sound odd. This one was apparently for HR and compliance professionals, some weekend workshop thing at a hotel downtown. She made it sound so boring I almost felt bad for her. I nodded when she brought it up at breakfast. She'd already packed, already booked the room, already had the itinerary printed and folded next to her coffee mug. "We'll go over employee engagement strategies," she said, sipping her coffee. "And DI metrics. You'd hate it." I smiled. "Sounds riveting." She laughed, light, casual, but didn't look me in the eye. I didn't think much of it until after she left. The house was too quiet. I sat on the couch, remote in hand, skipping through channels like I was trying to outpace a thought I hadn't had yet. Something gnawed at the back of my mind, soft but persistent. That's when I remembered the keychain. Years ago, back when we were newly married and constantly misplacing things, I bought us both Bluetooth GPS key finders. Small plastic squares that beeped when you pinged them from an app. Hers was still synced to my account. We joked about it at the time. "Just in case you ever run away," I'd said. She had laughed. "If I ever run, I won't be using keys." But she never took it off. I hadn't checked the app in months. It wasn't even installed on my new phone. But curiosity, or maybe instinct, made me dig it out of the cloud, reinstall it, and sign back in. I told myself it was harmless. Just a weird little impulse. Not snooping, just clarifying. I waited for the blue dot to appear, and it did. But it wasn't in Austin. It wasn't even close. She was at a lakeside in north of the city, a boutique spot near Highland Park with little cottages and a restaurant that offered wine pairings and live acoustic music on weekends. I knew the place. We talked about going once years ago but never did. Too pricey. Too far. Too romantic for just a getaway. The blue dot pulsed there. Room 207. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't want to go. I told myself I wouldn't go. That this was already more than I wanted to know. But an hour later, I was in the car. The drive felt endless and instant at the same time. I don't remember most of it. Just the shape of my knuckles wrapped tight around the steering wheel, and the way my chest felt like it was being crushed 1 pound at a time. I didn't call her. Didn't text. Didn't even think about what I'd say. I just kept driving. When I got to the inn, the parking lot was nearly full. Couples walked hand in hand between the wooden cabins and the softly lit restaurant. It smelled like cedar and rosemary and would smoke. It was beautiful. It was int asterisk mate. I parked at the edge of the lot, heart racing. Inside the lobby, the clerk didn't ask for much. I gave Jessica's name and said I was her husband. He didn't blink. Just checked the screen and said, "Second floor, third door on the left. Room 207. My feet felt like they weighed 50 pounds each as I climbed the stairs. I kept expecting something. A scream of denial in my head. A rational voice telling me to turn back. But there was just a hum. Like my body was moving without me. The hallway was silent. When I got to the door, it was slightly ajar. Not wide open, just cracked. Enough to hear sound. I heard laughter. 2 voices. Jessica's, unmistakable. The other, a man's, lower, relaxed, familiar. I didn't need to peek. I already knew it was him. The man from the parking lot. The Lexus guy. Still, I looked. Through the crack in the door, I saw her. Sitting on the edge of the bed in a white robe, hair damp, legs crossed. Her skin was glowing the way it did after a hot shower. She held a glass of red wine in one hand. Her eyes were fixed on him. He was sitting across from her in a low armchair, legs spread, wine glass dangling between his fingers like it belonged there. He looked comfortable. Too comfortable. Jessica reached out and touched his knee as she laughed at something he said. He leaned forward, reached for her hand. Their fingers touched. I stepped back, as quiet as I could. I hadn't made a sound. And I turned around. I didn't confront them. I didn't push open the door or explode or demand answers. I just walked back down the stairs, through the lobby, and into the night. The world outside was unchanged. People checking in, staff setting candles along the path. A couple walked past me holding hands, giggling about some wine tasting they'd done. I stood by my car for a minute, staring at the steering wheel like I wasn't sure it would still turn. My whole body felt hollow. I don't know how long I stood there. Eventually, I got in and drove away. There's this thing that happens when your brain catches up to your heart, when your logic finally shatters the last sliver of denial. That was what happened in that moment. No more excuses. No more explanations. No more waiting for her to admit it or me to find the right way to ask. I had seen everything I needed to see. She wasn't confused. She wasn't drifting. She wasn't unsure of her feelings. She was in a robe, drinking wine, holding someone else's hand, and laughing. That was the part that burned. The laugh, like it was all normal, like nothing was broken. On the drive home, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even listen to music. I just drove in silence, the road stretching endlessly in front of me. I passed gas stations and diners, places we'd been together once. Places where we laughed and told inside jokes that don't exist anymore. I kept picturing the scene through that cracked door. The robe, the wine, the softness of her voice. She used to sound like that with me. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the sun was almost gone. The porch light blinked on automatically, illuminating the doormat she picked out, the one that said "Home Sweet Home" in looping cursive. I stared at it for a long time before stepping over it. Inside, everything was exactly as we'd left it. Her coffee mug still in the sink. The blanket she always stole from me on the couch. Our wedding photo hanging above the TV. Our arms wrapped around each other, beaming young. I stood in front of that picture until my legs ached. Then I went upstairs and sat on the edge of the bed. Her side still smelled like her perfume. And I finally let myself feel it. Not just the hurt, but the ending. Not loud, not violent. Just still. Like a door that closes with no click. Something in me died that night. Something I didn't even know was still alive. Not love exactly. That had been fading for a while. What died was hope. The hope that she'd explain it. That she'd choose me. That this was salvageable. She'd made her choice. Not with words, but with the robe. With the glass. With the touch. And I had seen it with my own eyes. Jessica came home the next day just before noon, same as she'd said she would. As if nothing had happened. She walked in carrying a small paper bag of pastries and a reusable coffee cup from one of those boutique cafes with overpriced foam art. Her keys jingled as she dropped them into the bowl by the door, the same bowl where mine used to sit beside hers. I'd moved mine to the office drawer 3 weeks ago. She never noticed. She called out, casual, like we were still us. "Brought back your favorite, that almond croissant thing," she said. They were almost out. I was sitting at the kitchen table, pretending to read something on my laptop. I looked up and gave her a neutral nod. Nothing more. I didn't trust myself to speak yet. She didn't ask questions. Didn't pause. Just went on talking about how the conference was draining, how the drive back was long, how she almost hit a raccoon on the highway. She didn't mention the Lakeside Inn. She didn't say a word about room 207. She was smiling, like everything was fine. That's when it really hit me. She wasn't hiding anymore. Not because she wanted to come clean, but because she didn't care if I found out. I watched her lean against the counter, sipping her drink, phone already back in her hand, scrolling as if I were a roommate, a background actor in her life. She didn't seem guilty, or even cautious. There was no trace of the woman I used to know, the one who used to play music and dance in the kitchen when she was happy. The one who used to climb into bed and curl into me like I was home. Now she barely looked at me. And in that silence, I realized she hadn't come back to me. She'd come back to the house, to convenience, to structure, to the guy who remembered to change the air filters and paid the mortgage. The husband-shaped placeholder. The rest of the day passed like some surreal stage play. She unpacked her bag in the bedroom while I folded laundry in the guest room. She asked if I'd seen her charger. I pointed without speaking. She hummed under her breath while brushing her hair, then wandered off to water her dying plants, as if nurturing something made her feel like a good person. At dinner, she offered to order Thai. "You like that basil chicken, right?" she said, as though that tiny familiarity was still enough to bridge the chasm between us. I said I wasn't hungry. I didn't lie. My stomach was a knot. Food felt like an insult. Later that night, she watched a show in bed. I sat downstairs, scrolling through photos of us on my phone, wondering when exactly her eyes had stopped looking like they meant what they said. There was one photo in particular that stopped me cold. Us on our second anniversary. Sitting on a park bench, her head on my shoulder, my hand on her thigh. Her smile in that photo was pure, real. It had been raining earlier that day, and we'd forgotten an umbrella. We were soaked, laughing, in love. I remember her saying, "Even storms feel easy with you." Now, the storm was her, and it hadn't been easy for a long time. That week, we coexisted like ghosts. Everything looked normal from the outside. We made small talk. She asked if I'd pick up more oat milk. I asked if she needed anything dry cleaned. She left lipstick stains on coffee mugs. I left dishes in the sink. We navigated each other like diplomats in a Cold War. Polite, restrained, mutually avoiding eye contact that lasted too long. And still, she never brought it up. Not once. No mention of where she'd been. No explanation. No apology. Not even a lie to keep the illusion going. I think that was the most brutal part. She didn't even try to cover it anymore. She thought I was too soft, too passive, too loyal to walk away, and maybe she was right for a time. I was still trying to untangle the timeline in my head. Was it just that guy from the parking lot? Or were there more? How long had she been gone while standing right next to me? Her routines changed. She stopped pretending to go on runs and started staying out later. Work dinners, she said. Late calls. Networking events. Every time, her voice was lighter, freer. I'd hear her on the phone in the other room, laughing, speaking softer than she ever did with me anymore. I didn't recognize the tone. It wasn't just infidelity, it was int asterisk Macy, given to someone else like it had never belonged to me. One night, I heard her humming through the wall, some love song that used to be ours. I don't even think she realized she was doing it, but hearing it coming from her, knowing where she'd been, what she'd done, it felt like she was stealing something sacred and handing it to someone who hadn't earned it. I started sleeping in the guest room, for my back. She didn't protest. She didn't ask why. She didn't ask anything. Sometimes I'd hear her come in late, past midnight, tiptoeing through the hallway like she was still trying to protect the fantasy. Like if she was quiet enough, the truth wouldn't catch up to her. But the truth lived with us now. It sat between us on the couch. It filled the air during breakfast. It followed her perfume trail through the house. The truth didn't need to be shouted. It was already everywhere. One afternoon, I noticed she'd cleared a shelf in the closet, mine. My old flannel shirts were folded in a bin under the bed. No word, no reason, just quietly moved aside, making space, maybe for him, maybe for herself. And still, she said nothing. I began to wonder if she even remembered what honesty felt like, or if it was just a concept she discarded when it no longer served her. I caught her once, standing in the kitchen, staring out the window, wine glass half full. The sun was setting. Her shoulders were relaxed. Her lips parted like she was about to say something important. I held my breath, but then her phone buzzed, and she smiled at the screen. And the moment passed. We became actors in a play no one was watching. She'd fold laundry. I pretend to check emails. We'd share dinner in silence while the TV murmured in the background. She'd say, I'm going to bed. And I'd say, night. And the door would close behind her like punctuation. She was living a double life. And I was just the furniture in her first one. I asked myself every day why I stayed, why I didn't confront her, why I didn't blow the whole thing up. But the truth is, I didn't want confirmation. I already knew. And putting it into words would have meant admitting that the life I built, the vows we made, were dead. Some people need explosions to see the damage. I didn't. I could feel it in the quiet. In the way she never said, I love you, anymore unless I said it first. And even then, it felt like an obligation. In the way she laughed more at her phone than she ever did at me. In the way she looked right through me. And so I sat in that house, our house, watching her drift further into a life she no longer needed me for. She played music, scrolled through her feed, wore new clothes I'd never seen before. She dressed up more for errands than she ever did for date nights. I noticed everything, but I didn't speak, because deep down, I knew what had to happen. I just wasn't ready to do it. Not yet. There's a moment when grief stops feeling like fire and starts feeling like fog. It doesn't burn anymore, not exactly. It just settles. In your clothes, in your thoughts, in the way you stare blankly at the floor while brushing your teeth. That's where I was. Jessica had crossed some invisible line weeks ago. And I'd let her. I'd let the laughter on her phone pass without comment. Let the lies wrap around us like threadbare blankets. Let the silence bloom between us because confronting it felt like lighting a match in a room soaked in gasoline. But something in me had shifted. Not all at once. Slowly. Quietly. But surely. I woke up on a Tuesday, gray sky, cold coffee kind of morning, and sat on the edge of the guest bed with one sock in my hand for 15 minutes, doing nothing, just breathing, staring, thinking, and I realized something that startled me with its clarity. I didn't want to fix this anymore. I didn't want her to explain or cry or say the right words. I didn't want closure or answers or apologies. I didn't want to scream or guilt her into choosing me. I didn't even want revenge. I just wanted out. Not because I hated her. I didn't. I just couldn't keep living next to someone who'd already left. That night, while she was in the shower, singing softly, like nothing was wrong, I opened the hallway closet and pulled out my old suitcase. The big one I used for work trips before remote life swallowed everything. It still smelled faintly of cedar and detergent. I packed slowly. I wasn't running. I wasn't slamming drawers or yanking shirts from hangers. I folded. I zipped. I made sure not to take anything that was hers. No shared books, no sentimental kitchen mugs. Just my clothes, my watch, the few belongings that still felt like mine. I moved methodically, like someone disassembling a bomb. Because in a way the hardest part was our bedroom. I hadn't slept in there in weeks, but I still kept some of my things in the dresser. I walked in and stood for a moment, just watching the steam curl out from under the bathroom door. She was humming something familiar and cheerful. My chest tightened. She didn't know. She had no idea this was the last time I'd ever be in this room while it was still ours. I took only what was mine. Then I walked down the stairs and placed 3 things on the kitchen table. My house keys, my wedding ring, our wedding photo album. That album had been her idea. We should document our story, she said, back when we were engaged. So we remember how we felt. So we never forget. It was a white leather-bound book with gold leaf lettering. Inside were photos of our engagement shoot, handwritten notes to each other, ticket stubs from our honeymoon, **TS of us in grocery stores, laughing in parking lots, brushing our teeth side by side. Our story, or what we thought it was. I left it open on the last page, the one that was still blank, meant for the next chapter. I let that speak for itself. Outside, a moving van idled at the curb. I'd scheduled it the day before, paid extra to keep it quiet. The guy didn't say much. Helped me load everything in the back in under 10 minutes. It wasn't a lot. Not because I didn't have things, but because I didn't want to bring anything that felt tainted. When the last box was inside, I stood on the front porch and looked at the house, our house, one final time. I didn't cry. I thought I would. But there was nothing left to burn. just embers cold and soft. I climbed into the passenger seat of the moving van. The driver gave me a polite nod. Where to? I gave him the address of the apartment I'd signed the lease on a few days prior. A small place in Texarkana. Quiet neighborhood, white walls, a second-hand couch, and more peace than I'd had in a year. He nodded and pulled away from the curb. I didn't look back. I imagined her stepping out of the shower 15 minutes later, wrapping herself in that gray robe, walking downstairs to pour a glass of wine or check her texts, and seeing the table, the ring, the keys, the album. I wondered what she'd feel, if she'd feel anything. Shock? Guilt? Relief? Maybe nothing at all. I didn't leave a note. No big monologue. No dramatic goodbye. There was nothing left to say. She knew what she'd done. I knew what I couldn't live with. That was enough. By the time the van crossed the city line, night had fallen. The road ahead was dark, mostly empty, and for the first time in months, my chest felt light. Not happy, not healed, but free. I slept that night on a mattress on the floor. The furniture wouldn't arrive until the morning. I used a hoodie for a pillow and my coat as a blanket. It was cold, and my back ached. But it was mine. The silence felt new, strange, a little lonely, but clean. There were no footsteps on the stairs. No soft vibrations of someone texting at midnight. No scent of someone else's cologne hiding behind her hair. Just quiet. I lay awake for a while, staring at the ceiling, and listened to my own breathing. I wasn't okay. Not yet. But I wasn't in pieces anymore. And that mattered. In that quiet apartment, I rediscovered myself. Jessica texted, called, even cried into voicemails. I listened, then deleted. I walked alone, ate alone, slept without fear. No lies, no second-guessing. I picked up photography again, wrote thoughts in a journal. Life slowed down, and for the first time in years it felt honest. Healing didn't arrive loudly. It came in silence, in small mornings, and in breathing without bracing for pain. A year later, I saw her in a mall, laughing with friends. Until she saw me, she froze, then left without her purse. I didn't move, didn't feel hurt, just silence, the kind I earned. Days later, I got a letter, bank documents, a secret account in my name. Her version of an apology, maybe. I voided it. Later, she confessed to using my info at work, fixed it, and vanished again. No words, no drama. And in that final silence, I knew our story was done.